We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you is Friday, February 27th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Cheska.
Happy Friday, everyone!
Happy Friday! Happy Friday! Also, Moonji's with us.
Good morning.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we finally reached to the end of the work week, and for many people that means one thing: catching up on Korean dramas and films. And one of the biggest reasons audiences around the world can't seem to get enough of them is, of course, the romance. And while compelling storylines certainly play a role, much of the appeal comes from how memorable the lead characters are written to be. So, Cheska, which film character or actor, someone you thought felt like your ideal type, was your favorite?
I would give you a specific type as a girl, even though I know it's called a hopeless romantic for a reason. I do hopelessly fall for the committed, the devotional male characters, like the ones that say, I would just do anything for you kind of type. And K-dramas are pretty much filled, I think, with these type of male personas. In Korean, we call them sunebo, and it literally means to die for love.
I think that amount of level of dedication is so rare, which is why it feels so endearing.
That's why we go for fantasy, right? Because we want to see things we can't find the reality in the fantasy. Yeah.
Right, very true.
Very hopeless.
What about you, Moonju?
As Jessica just mentioned, Korean actors and the characters they bring into reality, they're all very charming, attractive, right? But moving beyond these K-dramas, as a huge fan of K-reality romance TV programs, I find that male characters appearing in those shows are incredibly handsome, attractive, and also they're pretty and highly professional in their respective careers.
Right.
So I think this combination of professionalism and all those characteristics have probably played a massive role in driving today's K-romance wave.
So it's not just a scripted fantasy, but also seeing real personalities and successful professionals on reality shows that makes the appeal more relatable. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. The global popularity of Korean dramas and films has created a new cultural phenomenon, where male characters, especially leads, are often seen as the textbook boyfriend. And because these characters are almost always portrayed as Korean men themselves have, for many international viewers, become increasingly idealized. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how overseas women perceive Korean men, the growing fascination with them, and the criticism and negative perspectives surrounding this trend, and whether these images and stereotypes reflect reality. As we just saw in a video, the global rise of K-content seems to be shaping not only entertainment trends, but even perceptions of relationships and romance. So how has Korean content influenced the global interest in specifically Korean men, Cheska?
Do you know when you know you've made it big? I think is when everything sort of becomes a commodity in the global market. I think first for Korea, it was the K-beauty,
right?
The food, the pop culture, and now people.
The men, yeah.
More specifically Korean men, as portrayed through, as we discussed, K-dramas and K-pop, the stylish, the devoted, the attentive types that pour their love and life into their girls. That fantasy, carefully packaged through years of storytelling and idol culture, has really translated into real-world interest around the globe. Now, in Brazil, Netflix even produced a dating reality show featuring Korean men. In Japan, dramas centered around Japanese women falling in love with Korean men have drawn major popularity. And in real life, we're actually seeing a noticeable rise in international couples like Korea-Japan couple as well. And I believe for some of the viewers that are watching and some of us here, there was a very popular drama called 겨울연가 back in the day with actor Bae Yong-jun. And it was this crazy time of where Japanese women started to fall madly in love with Korean men, Yonsama. And they would travel to Korea just to, see those drama sites and find Korean men. So I think this is kind of like a very continuing trend that happened, and now it's just becoming big and more global.
Right, and we also see that in reality shows, there are also Korean celebrities that are married to Japanese women.
Yes.
It's become definitely more commonplace. So in a way, the Korean wave has expanded beyond music, beauty, and dramas. Now even personal relationships are becoming part of that cultural curiosity. And this growing fascination isn't just anecdotal. well, international media has also started taking notice. So how have global media reported on this growing interest in Korean men, Woonju?
Yeah, in fact, a few years ago, CNN Travel actually highlighted this trend, shedding light on Western women visiting South Korea in search for love. The research aimed to explore the impact of rising international profile of Korean pop culture on tourism. They analyzed that these women were drawn to the country by a phenomenon known as the Netflix effect. The report also put a spotlight on popular YouTube couples featuring Korean men and foreign women.
So that really shows how entertainment can shape real-world travel, dating trends, and even online content. But that raises another question. So what kind of image are people actually forming about Korean men? So what traits do overseas women associate with Korean men these days?
All right, so CNN actually interviewed 123 women from North America and Europe and found that they largely perceive Korean men as romantic, patient, affectionate, and highly attentive. Interviews mentioned how Korean men are open to their embracing their effeminate sides, and additionally, noting the contrast with the catcalling culture sometimes experienced overseas. They often view Korean men as cultured and gentlemanly due to the absence of such catcalling behavior in South Korea. Much of this perceived image, however, is heavily influenced by the male characters seen in K-dramas, as you can see from our screen right now. In reality, the men portrayed on the screen are just less a reflection of everyday Korean men and more of a projection of the ideal partner that Korean women desire.
Real quick, Woonju, what do you think? Do you think you embody those traits?
Very
No, that's why I think I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here in the Arirang now and dealing Netflix or something.
Fair enough.
That kind of explains everything, right? Yeah.
So the image seems less about reality, more about the fantasy created through Korean dramas, as Woonju just pointed out. Still, online discussions suggest a slightly more grounded perspective as well. So what else is being said about Korean men, Cheska?
Yes, so some overseas online communities even share manuals, even like descriptions, information for those who do want to date Korean men. And interestingly, these descriptions I think are a bit more realistic, and I would even say, at least the ones that I've read for this episode, quite close to being accurate. Woonju, I'm quite interested to hear your opinion as the representation of Korean men. So they are described as, compared to Western dating culture, as less forward and aggressive when making the first move, quite fond of being called oppa, which when used between men and women is an endearing term. They're said to be more reserved about public displays of affection and sometimes uncomfortable with the ideas of their girlfriends having too many or any male friends. In Korean, we call them 남사친. They would also be described as having really good food dates because, as you all know, Koreans tend to place huge importance on eating together. So when you are dating a Korean man, there's a saying, you can never have a bad meal.
That's a really good trait for the Korean men are being associated with, I have to say.
I think it's the most attractive quality.
I think that's also because maybe cafe culture is really developed here in Korea, so I guess maybe that's right. So that's really interesting. It sounds like a mix of cultural differences and everyday dating habits rather than a single stereotype, which naturally brings us to the biggest question behind all this. So how accurate do you think these images that are being set forth about Korean men really are, Cheska?
I'm very much looking forward to hearing your response, Woonju. I think it's really hard to say because it's almost impossible to generalize a single gender. Just as an example, I would pretty much fall into a category of Korean woman, but I think there are so many things that I don't typically fit into when describing a specific nationality. But I do understand sort of the need for it because we do have like a one-liner for, say, like a French man or like Italian men. So based on the content, I do understand that some images and descriptions have emerged to describe Korean men. On the more positive side, I honestly think in any culture, nationality, there are different spectrum of any men and women. So in the most positive sense, I'm genuinely glad that now Korean men, Asian men in general, are now given more depth and even description when it comes to understanding them, because as we will discuss more later on, I think historically Asian men have been simplified to very unfair stereotypes, in my opinion. So not fantasy, but more accuracy, I think is a very positive sign. Yeah.
So like you said, obviously everyone has a different experience and everyone's like made from their own experiences. Like some people, it depends on which culture someone grew up in. That influences a lot as well.
Yeah, you can be a Korean man and still have very vastly different personalities.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So Moonju, I feel like you're being put on the spot a lot today, but what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I completely agree with Cheska. I believe it's just largely just a cultural difference. And at the end of the day, men everywhere are quite similar, regardless of countries or where you're from. Every society has, its exemplary individuals as well as those on the very opposite end of the spectrum. And dramas naturally tend to feature those ideal types as their leading men because that's exactly what captivates viewers and draws attention. And in fact, fans go wild for these characters sometimes precisely because they are very hard and rare to find in the reality.
Exactly.
And also, as we all know, when you're deeply focused on something, you really tend to see only those things, right? And it's highly likely that because these women coming to South Korea looking for love are only looking for those kind of men, and that's why they're only noticing those type of men that we are talking about these days. So I think that's kind of cultural difference and like what they're really looking for in South Korea here.
That's a fair observation. So it does sound like perception plays a big role here. People may notice what matches the image they already have in mind. So to get a more personal perspective on this, we're going to talk to a foreign national who actually married a Korean man. So that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Han-tae, whom viewers may remember from her previous visit to our studio. So originally from Italy, now married to a Korean man, she's joining us via Zoom to share her first-hand experience on today's topic on Korean men. So hello, Tae. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Oh, it's nice to be here again. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in. So Teddy, to get personal, how did you first meet your husband and what made you decide to marry him?
Actually, I got to meet my husband through a mutual friend. And at that time, I wasn't even looking forward to meeting someone. Like I wasn't actually looking for a boyfriend. But somehow it happened to go like that. So we got to meet and he wasn't really my type at first. And so I wasn't really thinking about having him as my boyfriend or even having him as my husband. But the more we talked, the more I felt more connected. Especially for me, a big thing is, since I'm from Italy, I don't know if that's the reason why, but food is a big thing and he's a chef. So in the end, he won my heart through the food, and that's how we got to meet each other. But actually, that's the one part. But also, another big thing was since we are a multicultural couple, it can be a bit difficult when it comes to talk to each other families. But for me, it was really easy to feel at home at his parents' house. And also when we went to Italy, the way I saw him talk to my parents and just have a good time with them, I think it was the biggest part that made me realize, oh, I want to live my life with him. That's it.
So actually, one of the descriptions that we pointed out about having good food dates actually proved to be accurate. In your case, that we never disappoint when it comes to food. That's fantastic.
It is.
But on top of that, many common perceptions that we talked about here on the studio of Korean men, does that match your real experience? Are there differences that you can enlighten us?
Well, he's not older than me, so the oppa part doesn't really doesn't apply to my husband. Yeah, that's not my case. But apart from that, I might say my husband is not really the Korean man you might think that would. Yeah. Anyway, so like my husband actually, like Koreans, they are not really good when it comes to words. So they're not good at talking, but they tend to express themselves through actions, I feel like. And my husband is also one of those. So for example, for me at the beginning was quite interesting how they would carry your bag, because it's not common in Italy at all. But they would carry your bag, but sometimes they wouldn't say, I love you. But my husband is good at that too now. So I feel like I was quite fortunate, like lucky meeting him, because he's not really the normal Korean guy, I think. But on the other hand, I might say that the reality is not really as it is in dramas, and especially also reality shows. When you see men in reality shows, they are so full, they are so confident of themselves, they are really rich, they are powerful, they are like they are perfect. But in the reality, like Korean men, they are so different, because my husband is good at saying I love you, but other friends' husbands, they never say I love you because they are not used to say that. So I feel like in my case, it's more similar to how we can see men in dramas, or maybe because I'm in love, could be. But that's not the normality, I think.
Yeah, I see. Thanks for sharing your own love story. Our last question for you today is, what are some differences that you notice between Korean men and Italy men?
From my personal experience, I think that Korean and Italian men are actually quite similar, because they both really care about family, and they take responsibility for their work. So my father in Italy and also my husband, they both are similar on that aspect, because they both work hard, they help at home, and they are really trying to support the family. They both cook for the family. So that's really similar in my experience. But as I said already, I might say that the biggest difference I can find is that the way they express themselves. So Italian men tend to be more direct and expressive, especially when there is a problem. We try to find a solution, and even if we fight and shout to each other, in the end, we find a solution. But on the other hand, I find that Korean men, especially my husband, sometimes they prefer to avoid conflicts and maintain more harmony. And like to think a bit more, and then either not talk about the problem at all, or talk about it quite later. So that's the biggest thing, I think. But I still believe that there is nothing like Italian man, Korean man. I think it's more about this man and that man. Yeah.
I think it's clear just hearing you talk about your husband that while he's not the perfect like K-drama man, he's your perfect match, which is what's really important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just spoke with our Italian guest who's married to a Korean man about her real life experiences and how they compare with the images often seen in Korean dramas. But as global interest grows, some experts warn that this trend may also cause problems. So what problems can arise from overly idealizing Korean men, Jessica?
Yes, so while it is great to see the power of culture influence how the world sees Korean men, there are definitely some things to consider, like you said, Sujin. Some experts caution that the moment any singular type of people are packaged and consumed as a kind of romantic fantasy bundle, then it can lead to a simplified and misdirected objectification. And instead of cultural exchange to understand and learn about Korean culture, it can lead to fantasy consumption and, even worse, a type of fetish. And kind of like, I think a lot of us remember, we had this yellow fever.
Right.
So I think that can be a very dangerous line. And this is a real danger when admiration sort of turns into stereotyping or fantasy-driven consumption. And it would really risk reducing real individuals to simplified images, which could blind people from seeing the wider cultural depth and the background the person actually has.
It really is like a double-edged sword, I feel like, at
Very much
times.
so, yeah.
So admiration can quickly turn problematic when people are reduced to stereotypes rather than seen as individuals. And part of that misunderstanding may come from how romance is portrayed on screen. So what are some other risks when people romanticize Korean men too much, Minju?
Yeah, the men portrayed in K-dramas or on the screen generally are heavily idealized and more than often very far from the reality. Naturally, there are bad individuals here in South Korea, including men who commit crimes against women or those kind of really malicious things. So we must put a strong caution against the unconditional idealization. There have been even a romance scams in Brazil that exploit the desire to date Korean men, highlighting the critical need to remain vigilant against the malicious schemes.
So while Korean content creates positive interest, it can also create unrealistic expectations and even open the door to misuse. So which brings us to the bigger takeaway from today's discussion. So what should viewers keep in mind about these images or the portrayals we see on dramas, Jessica?
So when I was preparing for this episode, I recall this very specific term. Have you all heard of, quote, book boyfriend?
Yes, as a YA fantasy lover, I live by that, yes.
So for those of viewers who might not be familiar, it's a boyfriend described, a male character described in a book that is dangerously attractive, hot, and just about perfect, right? So I actually have a younger brother, and we lived overseas for over a decade, and I vividly recall him telling me in the most honest coffee chat one day that Asian men, Korean men included, are not seen as desirable or attractive in the dating scene. I mean, as an older sister, I tried to tell him about all the great qualities that he had, but he actually said it was a cultural stereotype and a fixed image at the time. Even in the media, Asian men have a typical look, nerdy, glasses, very awkward with girls. So it's almost remarkable how quickly and vastly that image has changed from that to now being fantasy type, almost like a second version of book boyfriend. And I think the moral of the story is how quickly people can be influenced. And I honestly think it's very positive that Korean men, Asian men and women included, are now seen as beautiful, smart, and deep as they really are. But just like book boyfriend, I think what is created for fantasy should remain in its place, whether it's the novels, books, or our iPads. And we should spend more time looking for real people who have wonderful qualities regardless of their culture and ethnicity. Yeah.
Right, so like you mentioned towards the beginning of the show, you mentioned how like different nationalities have one-liners that they're associated with.
Yes.
And growing up in an age where, you know, Asian men weren't typically seen as desirable,
Exactly.
I do welcome this kind of change.
too.
But
Yeah.
there are, you know, it is a double-edged sword.
It
basically.
is. It's great that we have more depth now, but I think we should be more accurate when it comes to that description.
Right, right. What are your thoughts on this?
Pretty much very similar, and I think we just have to remember that just enjoy the shows for what they are and just separate fiction from the reality. That's the most important part, I think.
Right, so Korean content continues to bring people closer across different boundaries and cultures, but as we've heard today, real relationships are far more complex than any drama storyline. So enjoy the fantasy, but remember that every culture and every person has different sides, and in the end, the most important takeaway may be simple. People should be seen as individuals, not just characters from a script. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back on Tuesday at 10:30 in Korea time following Monday's substitute holiday for Independence Movement Day. A big thanks to Cheska.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
And also Moonju.
Thanks for having me today.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. And remember that while not every Korean man is a K-drama lead, you might still meet your main character during the weekend. We are
News Generation.